Welcome, everyone, to an NCAA.com March Madness chat. I'm Andy Katz, pleased to be joined by Senior Executive Vice President Dan Gavitt from the NCAA on the heels of the NBA making an announcement on Thursday. They're coming back. End of July in Orlando, 22 teams, but that also means that the NBA draft will not be June 25th. It now will be October 15th, which, of course, means we need a new withdrawal date for early entrants. It was supposed to be June 3rd, and now it will be when, Dan?
Great to be with you, Andy, and great news out of the NBA today for all of us who love basketball. The new withdrawal date now for NCAA college basketball players testing the waters will be August 3rd or 10 days after the NBA draft combine, whichever comes first. The August 3rd date is 2 months now later than, as you mentioned, from the current date of June 3rd. To give as much time as possible for players to make informed decisions about their future. The real hope is that they'll be able to go through the draft combine process and then make a decision to come back to school or stay in the draft within 10 days after the conclusion of that process. But we don't know exactly what the NBA draft process will look like. That's still to be determined, and so we're hopeful that this will meet the needs of those student athletes who are testing the waters.
Yeah, so the combine aspect has sort of been left open-ended. We would assume it would be virtual, but we don't know. Obviously, at this juncture, the NBA is still focusing on getting back to play in Orlando first. If there is a combine and it ends up being later and not in July, then what was into the decision saying, you know what, we've got to at least put a deadline down, and it's August 3rd?
Yeah, the hope very much is that they'll be able to go through that process and get full information to make an informed decision for them and their families. But at some point when we get close to the start of the fall semester, it's really important, if you're going to come back to college, that, for your academic pursuits as well as your engagement with your team and your teammates, that, you be all in. So, classes now, as we know, are going to start in some cases as early as, early August with the impact of COVID-19. And so we thought August 3rd was about as late as we could wait, to provide full opportunity, extended opportunity for those players to get as much information as possible. But at some point, they're either going to have to decide if they want to be a pro or if they want to be a college basketball player.
Yeah, let's be clear about a couple of things. While early entrants and seniors have not been able to do any in-person workouts, a lot of them have been doing Zoom interviews. So there has been an NBA draft process, even though it's completely foreign to, what it normally is. But as you mentioned, Notre Dame, for example, starting school as early as August 10th. What kind of feedback did you get from either the Basketball Oversight Committee, the NABC, about at some point, if school is starting that early, we have to make a decision on what our roster would look like?
Well, you mentioned two key groups. This was a decision that was made actually by the Men's Basketball Oversight Committee, as blessed by the Division I Council. And we were in constant communication with the NABC leadership to make sure the coaches were comfortable with this plan as well. I think, their feeling was, let's try to be as reasonable as possible. This is such an uncertain time for players, student athletes, disconnected from their coaches and their team. Give them as much opportunity to get an evaluation, which started actually from all of them with an evaluation from the NBA Undergraduate Advisory Committee. There were 225 underclassmen who had requested that evaluation. Of those 225, 145 decided to stay in the draft for the time being and to test the waters. And now they've been waiting, to have a fuller process to go through, hopefully safely and with health in mind, as the NBA determines, certainly. And we've been respectful of that process to try to give as much time as possible before we had to make any decisions. And this decision really does extend out, as long as we think we can. Some coaches, frankly, would have much preferred an earlier withdrawal date for roster certainty, and because teams are starting to get back to campus now, hopefully to start summer workouts. But you know what? Keeping the student athletes' interests in mind and their families' future and their dreams and aspirations, giving them as much time as possible is where we should have ended up and where we did end up.
And Dan, what kind of communication was there with the NBA?
Regular. I mean, Kiki Vandeweghe from the NBA and Garth Listman, who works on his staff, have been just tremendous partners in regular communication. We'll continue to be in regular communication with them as we learn in the coming weeks here now what the process will look like. There will be a combine, we understand, of some sorts. There will be invitations for draft eligible players that go out, and that will start to narrow the field, because one of the things that we've learned, Andy, through the NBA's information sharing and collaboration is that the invitation to the draft combine is key, because if you're invited to the draft combine, there's a reasonable chance that you're going to be drafted. Those players that are not invited to the NBA draft combine, almost 100% of them do not get drafted in the last several years. So that's a real key, evaluation point for those players testing the waters. First, the undergraduate advisory committee evaluation, whether they're going to be drafted, second round, first round, or lottery. That's the first test. And then the second is that invitation. If they're not invited to the combine, it really is an indicator that they're not at all likely to be drafted. So I know, players are looking for that feedback so that they can make informed decisions. And we're all of the same mind. We want them to make very good decisions about their future now and in the future, whether it's be college basketball or a real good NBA opportunity.
So that's a great point, Dan. I mean, I hope that we will know those invitees, even if the combine is much later, deeper potentially into the fall. If that were the case, it would be great for players, coaches, obviously, to know who got invited and who did not before a potential August 3rd deadline to make an informed decision. Well, Dan, I know everyone's incredibly busy right now. Stay safe as we continue to sort of work through all these different decisions in an incredible, unprecedented times.
Thanks, Andy. Good to be with you. Be well, stay safe, and look forward to talking to you soon.